Hi, we're going to cover a little more, well, a little beyond fundamental, but rooted in a fundamental idea that very often is overlooked in the process of most of us developing our understanding of music and playing the guitar. I've covered this in the last few videos, the subject of the tetrachord, how scales are constructed based on a four-note sequence consisting of two whole steps and a half step. Now that four-note sequence, that tetrachord, can be two whole steps followed by a half step, or it can be a half step followed by two whole steps, or it can be a whole step with a half step followed by another whole step. Either way, or any of those ways, it's two whole steps and one half step. Every mode that we play on the guitar, if you play modes, if you understand what modes are, where you begin and end on a different note in the key, consist of, well, most of them consist of two tetrachords stuck together, two four-note sequences. So in the case of a major scale, C major, C, D, E, F, two whole steps followed by a half step. Then you jump a whole step and you begin the next tetrachord, G, A, B, C, which follows the same structure as the first tetrachord. So you have two four-note sequences that have the same interval structure, whole step, half step, twice, with a whole step in the middle. And usually this is described simply as whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, where you have two whole steps, a half step, three whole steps, and a half step. But this overlooks the inherent tetrachord structure of the scale. And all of the modes can be described that way as well, two four-note sequences. Since you play an octave when you play a fundamental scale or mode, 8 notes, you have two groups of 4 automatically. Now, understanding what that structure is can really give you insight into the entire system, and you can use that as a tool for riffing and developing improvisational ideas and composing music and just understanding the music you already play. We talked about the C major scale and how it's structured, and in the last video, the F major key, or the key of F major, and how we can move across the fingerboard 4 notes per string if you understand the tetrachord structure of each string. Whole step, half step twice. Whole, half whole twice. Half, whole, whole twice. Ionian mode, Dorian mode, Phrygian mode. There are two modes which play a little differently, and those are the Lydian mode and the Locrian mode. Aeolian mode and Mixolydian mode, again, if you want to look at the last video, we talk about those. And I opened the door to Lydian mode and Locrian mode also last time, and I'd like to kind of pick up from there. So the Lydian mode begins on the 4th step of the key, and in the key of F, and we're using F because based on that previous exercise, F, of course, is the lowest fretted note on the fingerboard, and so it kind of gives us a wide range of possibilities that is unique to that key. So I want to stick to the key of F. It's pretty straightforward. If you aren't used to playing in F, just keep in mind it's all natural tones except for B flat instead of B. So it's sort of like the opposite of the key of G, where it's all natural tones except for the F sharp. And a lot of us maybe are kind of favor keys that have sharps in them, but it's good to get moving in the opposite direction on the other side of the circle. So if we start on B flat, we got B flat, C, D, E. That is a tritone, 3 whole steps in a row, and that's the beginning of the Lydian mode. Very often the Lydian mode is described as a major scale with a sharp 4. You can think of it that way. Well, if you take a major scale and you sharp the 4, then you have 3 whole steps in a row at the beginning of the scale, and 3 whole steps is a tritone. So we'll just say that the scale begins with a tritone, or the mode. Mode, scale, modes are scales. There are scales that are modes, and modes that are scales. all scales are modes on some level. It's very philosophical. The tritone. The next part of the scale picks up a half step higher on E. Oh, I'm sorry. B flat, C, D, E on F. There we go. B flat, C, D, E, F. And now you're beginning essentially the major scale by playing the second half of the Lydian mode. So the Lydian mode begins on the fourth. You play 4 notes and then you're back to 1. And so the second half of the Lydian mode is the first half of the Ionian mode. Simple, right? Now, thinking about it that way reveals, again, the function of the tritone in the overall structure of things. And this becomes even clearer when we look at the other mode that begins with the letter L. Now, I think it's just great that they both begin with the letter L and they have other things in common as well. And I think of Lydian mode and Locrian mode, they're like bookends, L and L, and lemon and lime. So they're very refreshing. So we have B flat, C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, and the Locrian mode, which begins on the 7th step of the key, will start on E, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E. The Locrian mode ends with the tritone and begins with a half step followed by 2 whole steps. The Lydian mode begins with a tritone and ends with 2 whole steps followed by a half step. So think about that for a minute. Locrian mode begins with a half step followed by 2 whole steps, ends with a tritone. Lydian mode begins with a tritone and ends with 2 whole steps followed by a half step. Half step at the end for the Lydian mode, half step at the beginning for the Locrian mode. Half step in the middle for both of them. They are a mirror image of each other. So if we take those 2 modes, Lydian mode and Locrian mode, and we kind of smush them together and we think of them as a big super mode. So we begin on the Lydian B flat. When we get to E, we pick it up again from the same note on the next string. But we go all the way up to B flat, and then we pick it up again from B flat on the next string. So we have these overlapping sequences. 4 steps on this string, tritone, 5 steps on this string, which is actually an inversion of the tritone. Why an inversion? Because, well, the tritone begins on B flat and ends on E. Now you might say, well, B flat to E, that's 6 half steps, right? I mean, if you count intervals in half steps, and a lot of people do, you would say, well, a tritone is 6 half steps. And the inversion of the tritone is also 6 half steps, right? Because you go from B flat to E, B flat, B, C, D flat, D, E flat, E. That's 6. And if you go from E to B flat, B, E, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, that's 6 half steps. But we're not playing all those notes, right? We're in the key of F, and we're not playing anything but natural tones and a B flat. B flat, C, D, E, E, F, G, A, B flat. Now when we play the notes of the key, which is really what matters, we don't have simply 6 half steps at both ends in either direction. We have 4 notes one way, 5 notes the other, and then 4 notes again. When we play the tritone, and then we play the inversion of the tritone, which is a diminished 5th, and then the tritone again, you can really hear the difference between going from B flat to E as opposed to going from E to B flat. The notes in between make all the difference. So this idea too different than now I can play that tritone inversion in this position, follow it with a tritone, so now Lydian mode and Locrian mode give us a resource for a musical idea. So you can see how using modes to sort of navigate through a set of musical harmonic melodic voyages, pathways I like to think of them, identifying the sequences based on intervals, based on tritones, tetrachords, knowing where the whole steps and half steps are in the modes, that will give you a lot more to work with than simply counting half steps, or simply saying that a mode is a major scale with a sharp whatever or a flat whatever. So thinking of modes and scales as intervals, as structures built on a fundamental building block, the four-note sequence, the tetrachord, or in the case of essentially an augmented tetrachord, the tritone, 3 whole steps instead of 2 whole steps and a half step. These are the building blocks of the structures of musical melody, harmony, etc., etc. And really, that's what we're talking about here as a fundamental idea. This is treated often as something very advanced, but it's only because someone forgot to talk about it at the beginning of your musical education, and mine as well. I learned about it a little later. But, when I realized how simple it is, really, you're just talking about 4 notes at a time. So, this is something I actually work with beginning students occasionally when they're, they don't have a lot of anxiety about learning theory because someone told them how complicated it was. So, anyway, I'm going to leave it at that today and pick it up again some other time when I get around to it. All right. See you then. Thank you.